Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakurotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashisya kramad vivaranasya cha. So we were discussing in the previous sutra, we are discussing this important topic of Savitarka samapathi. Tatra Sabda jnana vikalpaihi sankirna Savitarka samapathi. So Patanjali says that normally in all our cognitive activities, Sabda, artha and jnana, a word, its meaning and our knowledge, they all get mixed up. So we only get particularized knowledge of things. Now in yogic tradition, there is a transcendental way of knowing things, non-particularized. Normally, when we come to know of a definite object, we focus on that object, and there is simultaneously an element of excluding everything else. That's why we are able to cognize something for the time being. Because our cognition is intimately connected to the particular word which implies that object, and the object itself, and also the knowledge that we have of that object by associating the word with the objects. This is called a particularized knowledge. Now you will find in Vedanta also, when we go beyond the normal limitations of the mind, you will be able to transcend, expand our vision of cognition. We will be able to understand the essence of cognition itself without involving a particular word, that is Sabda, and a particularized object, artha. We will understand it soon as we proceed further. In fact, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the ascent towards higher transcendental cognition, understanding. That is when we transcend the limitations of the mind. This is an important point. Remember, very often we know, we read about some great spiritual persons endowed with this superhuman ability to understand things. Very often when we talk about a person who knows a lot of things, what we normally mean is that person knows a lot of things about a lot of things, a number of knowledge systems, a number of different areas of information and knowledge and scholarship. That's what we understand. So we have a very numerical way of understanding knowledge. But in yoga and Vedanta, there is an ascent from numerical totality to essential totality. In the Vedanta tradition, you will come across the Sarvavit, Sarvajnani, Sarvajna, all this. The one who knows everything, the one who understands everything. Here, the implication is anyone who understands everything in the particularized areas of knowledge. But it means, suppose you say God knows everything. A simple example. This is only example we can take. Suppose we say Isharai Sarvajna, that is Sanskrit. God is all-knowing, omniscient. We use the word. Frequently we make this mistake of interpreting this word, God knows everything. he knows astronomy, physics, chemistry, mathematics, maybe shipbuilding, everything. That's not an implication. So sarva in Vedanta means the essence, the one from which everything comes down, which forms the essence of everything. So that's a real implication in Vedanta. So in yoga, we are only trying to understand some aspects of Vedanta. This should be strictly kept in mind. Yoga is relatively a lopsided system compared to Vedanta. But the importance of yoga is it comes down to you to the level of your mind. It comes down to our level of the mind. And then it also analyzes the mysteries of human mind, its workings, the emotions and feelings, the world of ideas, emotions and feelings. We get a clear picture of what we normally cannot understand by reading or by listening to. We turn the attention inward into the world of our own mind, and then we understand how our emotions and feelings and attitudes work. That's the relevance of Vedanta. So, as we evolve and go beyond the triple limitations of particularized knowledge in terms of a definite word and its corresponding object and the knowledge of the particular object, when we go beyond that, we are actually going beyond the limitations of mind as we understand. And when we go beyond the limitations of the mind, then we know everything. That's an important point to remember. The problem before us is we are all prisoners of our own mind. And so long as we are prisoners of our own mind, we are prisoners of our own emotions, our own feelings, our own attitudes, our own particularized forms of knowledge. So, in this particular sutra, especially in the 42nd sutra, Tatra Sabdartha Jnana Vikalpaihi. So every understanding, every cognition, in terms of Sabda, Artha and Jnana, in terms of word, its implication and knowledge, it is only vikalpa. It is not the real thing. To give an example, well, a simple example may be, suppose in front of us there is an object, let's say a book. We give it a name. The book has a name, or a word that implies that book, the word book. When we use the word, immediately before us there is the object, the book itself. And then our understanding, our knowledge, when we relate that word with the object, these three go together. Now Patanjali tells you that the real object is different. What you see in front of you is only a vikalpa. It has something to do with Buddhism also. Buddhists tell you that our mind is always in a state of perpetual movement. Thoughts and ideas and consciousness flows continuously as a stream. And in front of us, in front of our cognitive faculties, we may see many momentary objects. They pass through this vijnanam, this platform of consciousness. But really, these objects we cognize because we are able to connect our own consciousness with this external object. They are only the shadows of the reality. That's what yoga says. Of course, there's a fundamental difference between Buddhism and yoga. Buddhism doesn't accept the reality of objective world. It could kshanikata, everything exists only for one kshana, one split second. Everything is momentary. But yoga philosophers don't say that. But they tell you that what you see in front of you, in terms of word, its implication, and the object, and the knowledge that is a result of this association of word and its object, that is only vikalpa, that is only shadow, that is not a reality. We get a real understanding of the object when we transcend the triple foundations of Sabda, Artha and Jnana. So the early stage is called, it is mentioned here, it is Savitarka. When we are still at the level of Sabda, Artha and Jnana, it is Savitarka Samapathi. When you transcend it, it is Nirvitarka Samapathi. That is the subject of 43rd Sutra that we have to discuss today. The 43rd Sutra is Smriti Parishuddho Surupa Shunye Sati is the word is there. Or Surupa Shunya Iva. There is another version of the Yoga Sutra in other books. Iva Arthamatra Nirbhasa Nirvitarka. When memory, Smriti Parishuddho, Smriti means memory. Parishuddhi means purity. When memory becomes pure, it means when memory or chitta becomes completely emptied of vikalpas, of the Sabda Artha mixing up, Sabda Artha Jnana mixing up, then what happens? Then chitta remains as if it has lost its true nature. The Surupa Shunya means mind loses its true nature, which means you transcend the mind. Mind ceases to be mind. We have to remember, and it should be always understood, this is not a journey that takes place at the level of concepts and ideas. We should never imagine to practice this through meditation. It can be very dangerous. So we are discussing a text which makes it clear that it is something that happens as a result of our own spiritual journey, our own spiritual practices. So one should not try to get rid of memories. Very dangerous. One should not deliberately try. It is only a state of yoga practice that you would achieve through your own spiritual evolution. Just as, if you just imagine that you have got a PhD in physics or in astrology, you don't become a scholar in physics or astrology. Just by imagining that you have got a big degree, you don't, or just because you become an expert in, let us say, suppose you imagine you imagine that you are become an expert in running an aircraft, a pilot, you don't become that. For that you have to study, you have to undergo training, several years of training, experience under great experts. Then only you actually become a proficient person, an expert in that chosen area. So also music, you have to practice for decades. It's a matter of lifelong practice. Then only you become a musician. Just by saying that or by reading about a great musician, his life or experiences, you don't become musicians. Like that, just reading the sutra, immediately I also would like to transcend my mind. It is very dangerous. One should never attempt that. This is an important thing. The first step for every human being is to have some good memories, good ideas, good thought currents in our mind. But here Patanjali is talking about an advanced stage of spiritual practice as mentioned as a result of these evolution practices in Yoga Sutra, which comes only to a person who has practiced for a long time. So one should be aware of this reality. It is not a state of choice, it is a matter of our own reaching that state as a result of our own growth and our own evolution. So Smriti Parishuddho means when our memory becomes purified. What it means is when memory becomes purified of vikalpas or wrong cognitions, then what happens? The chitta, it appears to have lost its own natural state. That's the meaning of Surupa Shunya. Surupa means its own natural state. Surupa Shunya means losing its own natural state. Shunya means empty. What does it mean? Mind is naturally a changing, always in a fluid state, wavering. Always one thought comes, another thought comes, it continues flow of frequently conflicting ideas and thought currents. That's what mind is. So that ordinary state of mind will change. It means mind will become steady. So mind ceases to be mind, or mind becoming something other than the mind. The real meaning is you transcend the mind, you go beyond mind, which means you go beyond waverings of the mind, you go beyond these fluctuations of the mind. That's the implication. Which means your mind becomes stable, tranquil, peace. That's the meaning here. Again, we have to remember, it is not the result of any imagination, it is the result of spiritual practices. As we mentioned earlier, one should always, first of all, try to practice some fundamental, essential disciplines, which are both moral and also spiritual in nature. That is, non-violence, ahimsa, then truthfulness, then having no greed or desire for things that belong to others, asteya, it's all technically called non-stealing. That's a translation. The implication is, well, even the thought of procuring something that doesn't belong to us, that belongs to somebody else, even the thought should not cross our mind. And in purity of life. Purity of life is very much implied here. Brahmacharya means purity of life. Emotions, feelings, thoughts, imaginations, all should be pure. And again, total freedom from possessiveness, so to speak, aparigraha. These are 5 fundamental disciplines, just spiritual and moral disciplines. When we practice these disciplines, 2 things happen. That's a very important thing to remember. First of all, the doors opening to negative channels are closed. When you practice, let's say, ahimsa, non-violence, what happens? When you practice it, the doors opening to negative channels are closed. What happens is, after yamas and niyamas, when you practice asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, all these disciplines, up to 6th, dhyana, samadhi, 7th and 8th. Up to dharana, which is the 6th discipline, you are going through this intense discipline, physical, psychological, and also spiritual. And of course, moral, that's where you begin. So, moral, physical, psychological, and spiritual disciplines. That's what we are doing. So, the first step is itself non-violence, ahimsa. The natural extrovert mind will always flow through violent tendencies, wrong, negative tendencies. That tendency, that natural state of human mind should be blocked. And mind should be turned to something else, something higher. That is ahimsa. That is non-violence. So violent tendencies get completely destroyed, or they become non-existent, and non-violent tendencies, ahimsa, takes its place. So any channel that opens to negative, that is violent tendencies, is blocked when you practice non-violence. So also when we practice asteya, the natural human tendencies, possessiveness and greed, will disappear. And then purity of life, which helps us, a person, to practice, to conserve his natural, spiritual, physical, and mental energies, resources. And again, when the person becomes totally free from greed, desire for things, aparigraha. When these disciplines are perfected, what happens? All the channels opening to negative nerve currents get completely closed. And then you experience this shauja, sandosha, tapaswadhyaya, Sarvapriyananda. This is niyamas called. Then purity, inner purity, outer purity, contentment, then kind of deep-rooted sense of kind of inner fulfillment. And also good concentration, tapa. Then also a natural interest in reading, listening to higher ideas, feeding our mind with good thoughts, holy thoughts, spiritually edifying thoughts. Swadhyaya. And again, Ishvara Pranidhana, a sense of surrender. Patanjali uses this term twice when he describes Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhana, the first step, the kindergarten, and also as a means, as a method for developing higher concentration. Ishvara Pranidhanatva, twice he uses. So in both ways, this Ishvara Pranidhana has got a great psychological significance. If a person can devote his whole life, energy, thoughts, everything to a sublime purpose, what happens is he purifies his mind, his energy resources. Whenever he does something, the thought of higher purpose. If a person is a believer in God, Buddha was not, but Buddha was a great yogi, no doubt about it. And of course, many of the great devotees in different religious traditions who practice self-surrender to God, they all became yogis. So frequently in the Yoga Sutra you find Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. It attracts a lot of attention from commentators, Vijnana Bhikshu, and then Vajaspati, and of course Rajamata and Rajodhar, King Bhoja. In all their books, in their commentaries, they emphasize the psychological and spiritual significance of Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to God. It's a very important thing. It completely changes our whole attitude. When there is a problem, we can go, it's God's will, finished. The problem is gone. When everything doesn't happen according to or up to your expectations, God's will, finished. Problem is over. On the other hand, if you don't believe in God, there's a Buddhist did not believe in God. Some of them were great yogis. They say it's for the good of the world. So when you bring in this Ishvara Pranidhana, this self-surrender ideal, immediately nothing remains on your head, on your shoulders. The huge burden that you feel was sitting on your head suddenly disappears, because immediately a millimeter gap between the heavy burden and your own skull, which means it is not sitting on your head. There is a millimeter gap. So what happens? You don't feel the heavy weight of the burden. This is the psychological significance of Ishvara Pranidhana. When you practice this, what happens? Your energy resources flow into positive channels. And then asana, pranayama, and pratyakara. All these produce tremendous energy resources. We should remember, at the grossest level, when a person practices some kinds of pranayama, let's say this Shishasana makes a person very energetic, Sarvangasana makes a person very energetic, Siddhasana makes a person very energetic, because they're all closely linked to the nerve currents, one way or other. So immediately you feel a lot of energy. So before we actually get perfection in these physical forms, some amount of yama and niyama disciplines are important. And then pranayama, it is a big dynamo of energy. When a person practices some important pranayama techniques, immediately he will generate a lot of heat within and a lot of physical nervous energy, which immediately manifests as mental energy. So before you do that, you should have already closed all the wrong channels, wrong doors, opening to wrong channels. Close the door, then it will flow in the right channel, through the right channel. If a person practices tremendous pranayama, and if he is not fully establishing freedom from greed, both aparigraha and asteya are linked to greed. So when you practice aparigraha and asteya, two yamas, and then you practice asana and pranayama, then what happens? The surplus energy will not make you hyperactive. It will flow in the right direction. You will feel more enthusiasm, more calmness, more quietude, more peace and tranquility within. After that comes, after pranayama, pratyakara. When you withdraw your mind, focus from external objects, withdraw it to yourself. Then also the outflow of energy towards negative channels should be properly controlled or closed. Otherwise, the when you withdraw your attention, your focus from external objects, attention is drawn inward. But before you turn your attention inward, before turning the mind away from external objects, you should have a good focus towards which mind should be turned. And that's possible only when we practice yamas and niyamas properly. This is a very important thing. And dharana also is a higher meditation technique. Dharana should be practiced only after one is fully established in yamas and niyamas. So, and then only comes dhyana. So the point is, when you reach this state of Nirvitarka samapathi, what happens is, all the negative channels are closed. And the energy produced by practice of yama, niyamasana, pranayama, pratyahara and dharana, of course, they are all flowing in the right channel. Right channel means we become more sattvic. Our memories become pure. Memories become sublime. When memories become sublime, what really happens is all the vikalpas, all the false, inaccurate cognitions disappear. Then memory becomes purified of vikalpa. That is smriti parishuddhi. But before trying to obtain the purity of memories, we should develop good memories. And this is a very important point, remember. One should have a good stock of good memories to bring back to our mind. That's an important thing. In the Ishavasya Upanishad, there is a mantra which I quoted earlier. Oh, kradosmara, kradamsmara, kradosmara, kradamsmara. So, a mind, a dying man, a man who has led a very good life, spiritual life, he has reached his last moment, and then he prays to his own mind. O mind, think of all the good deeds you have done, all the good samskaras you have generated. Every person should try to keep at least a substantial store of some good memories that he should be able to bring back to his mind when he is leaving this body. Otherwise, the problem, you can ask any doctor, any hospice nurse, you can ask them what happens if you don't try to store up some good memories, good samskaras. So that's why a dying man is praying to his own mind. Oh mind, think of all the good deeds you have done, etc. So the first step is to develop a lot of good memories. And good memories can be developed by doing good actions, speaking good words, trying to feed our mind with something sublime and pure. They will push away the wrong memories, wrong impressions. And in their place, you have a lot of good memories. And after achieving a lot of good memories, then you will be able to go beyond memories. That's an important thing. So long as we have conflicting memories in our mind, we will never be free from the torment of memories. So first step is to store up a lot of good memories. When you look back, you should be able to smile at your own life. And then we should be able to go beyond memories. That is smriti parishuddhi. The word is very important. Remember, its literal meaning in any dictionary or Apte or Monia Williams, it won't give you the meaning as intended by Patanjali. Patanjali here means, smriti parishuddhi means, what happens is, a state where you'll be able to transcend your own mind. It means you'll be able to transcend the fluctuations of your mind, where mind becomes free from all fluctuations and conflicts. And when mind is free from fluctuations and conflicts, then mind is not mind. Because mind remains a mind remains the mind only when it is full of fluctuations. Transcending the mind, going beyond the mind, means you are actually going beyond conflicting thought currents. That's why Surupa Shunya Ivar. And this happens when you achieve Smriti Parishuddhi. Then what happens? Artha Nirbhasa Nirvitarka. Then what happens? Whatever we are focusing on, it shines in our mind. In our mind means in our system. We will be able to recognize it without its association with Sabda and artha. And this is called Nirvitarka samapathi. So this sutra describes the direct experience of the real nature of objects. Real nature of objects means you are understanding the object minus is Sabda, Artha, Jnana, mix-up. That's the idea behind. In Savitarka Samapathi that we discussed earlier, the object of concentration is a vikalpa, which means it is not real. That's why a yogi, when he reaches this level of spiritual growth, he will be seeing everything in his pristine purity, in his true nature. That's because his smriti has already become pure and has gone beyond the mind. In Nirvitarka Samapathi, in other words, the real nature is revealed. In Savitarka, the knowledge is always mixed up with Sabda and Artha. In Nirvitarka, the knowledge is direct and true. This is the psychology of direct perception. You may call it, let's say, the real knowledge. Now remember, this is the real implication of many of the stories that we hear about great spiritual teachers who knew so much, because they had transcended the limitations of the normal mind. And when they transcend those limitations, their mind acquires a quality where it perceives things directly without mixing up Sabda and Artha. In the technical language, we can say there is a gradual ascent. The gradual ascent. That's the point here. In Savitarka, what is called the grihita, the knower, and the grahana, the sensory, the process of knowing things with senses, are already eliminated, but the known alone shines. And that known is a vikalpa. But in nirvikalpa, what happens is that absolute reality is revealed itself. In other words, what happens is, in this sutra, the implication is, when a yogi is meditating, he is cut off from all kinds of vrittis and smritis. So that's an important thing. When we don't practice yoga, and when we reach this level of yoga practice, we will be always knowing things, moving in the world of vrittis and smritis. Vritti, as we know, vrittis are nothing but the residual impacts or effects of all the actions that we have done consciously. Of course, unconscious actions also produce vrittis and memories, but of a different category. Whenever we do something with full awareness, involving our mind and the sense of perception, that experience will produce a residual effect, which is called vritti, which becomes a concentrated psychological phenomenon called samskara, which Vyasa interprets. To give an example, when we speak a word, that word, the act of speaking a word, has one effect. The listener hears the word. After that, the listener is gone, we are also somewhere else. But the listener has heard this word, something registered in his mind, which remains there even after has stopped hearing this word. And after we have stopped speaking this word, then also in our mind, the speaker's mind, also something is registered. The residual impact is called vritti, that we should remember. And smriti or memory is one of these vrittis. Vrittaya panchadaya, pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra, smritayaha. We already discussed earlier. There are 5 types of vrittis. Pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra, smritayaha. Smritaya means smriti, plural. So smritis or memories are also vrittis actually. When a yogi reaches this level of smriti parishuddhi, what happens is he is freed from all kinds of vrittis. Of course, some smriti will remain, but actually the smriti will be completely emptied of all vikalpas. When smritis become totally emptied of all vikalpas, then it is no more the smriti or memory as we understand it. It is only a shadow of that memory. No, and then what happens? All the vikalpas, all wrong cognitions completely disappear from the memory. Then the real object shines in his system. This is the mysterious the explanation of the mystery of yogi understanding everything. So frequently we read in books, in Vivekananda's life we read that he could learn a lot within a very short time and then remember things. It's because mind reaches that level of subtlety where you can cognize things not associated with Sabda and artha, but you can directly connect with jnana. Then it is called this Nirvitarka samapathi. After this, Patanjali takes up another sutra, which is 44th sutra, which we need some explanation. Etaya eva savichara nirvichara cha sukshma vishaya vyakhyata. The sutra. Etaya eva. Means we already discussed the Savitarka and Nirvitarka samapathi. We have already finished discussion on subtle principles, tanmatras, indriyas, etc. And this is just a summing up of this particular subject that we discussed now. Next one is 45th sutra. Sukshma vishayatvam cha alinga paryavasanam. Sukshma vishayatvam. It means, so alinga paryavasanam, that particular word we are already used earlier in the Samadhipada, but right now we will discuss again. The subtlety of the objects extend up to alinga mula. Okay, now alinga mula means when a person reaches the level of understanding the mahat tattvam. Mahat, alinga paryavasana means when you reach when through pariprasava, through involution, through this return journey from the gross to subtle, when you reach this level of your recognition or your identity with Purusha, then at that state, these differences, these fluctuations have no place. That's the meaning here. Now the question arises, is there some kind of a division between Sananda, Nirananda and Sasmida, Nirasmida? All this, we discussed this earlier, means this experience with kind of inner bliss and without inner bliss, and experience with a sense of identity, aham identity, and without aham identity. So Patanjali continues the discussion, giving more details to this. 46th sutra is Ta eva Sabhija samadhi. All these that we discussed so far, they constitute Sabhija samadhi. That means what we discuss now is Sabhija samadhi. Sabhija samadhi here means the penultimate state before Nirbija samadhi. Nirbija samadhi, Nirvikalpa samadhi, the highest state. Before that, we reach a point where all memories, all vrittis, all vasanas they're turned into some kind of a pure resemblance of vrittis and smritis. For example, it's called, Dagdha Bija Nyaya, means something resembling burnt or fried seeds. When we reach this state, our samskaras and vrittis, some of them may be there, but they are really not samskaras and vrittis. They become non-functional. Till we transcend, until we transcend vrittis and smritis and samskaras, there will be no spiritual progress, there will be no transcending the mind. When we transcend the mind through this smriti parishuddhi, when we reach that state, we are actually reaching a state where we have turned our own samskaras into burnt seed. A seed, when it is fresh, and if you put in a fertile soil, it will sprout, it becomes a tree. But suppose you burn the seed, or you fry the seed, or make the seed non-functional for all practical purposes, then the seed, even if you sow in fertile soil, it cannot sprout. It will not grow. It cannot become a tree. The reason is, it is actually no more seed. Like that, when we reach this state of Nirvitarka samapathi, we have practically turned our samskaras into burnt seed. For all practical purposes, his life will continue. Of course, this also agrees with Vedanta. In Vedanta, for example, when you reach this state of Jivan Mukta state, which is of course technically more advanced than the state we are discussing, still it can be explained giving that, taking as an example. When you reach a state of this Jivan Mukta state, but completely liberated, physically you will be living, doing your duties, doing your work, but it is only like the continuation of a momentum. Just as when you shoot an arrow, the arrow has left the bow, and the arrow will stop only when its velocity is completely extinguished. When it hits a target, it will fall down. Till that point, it will continue its flight, depending upon the velocity, the force with which the arrow is released. Like that, when a person reaches this state of transcending the mind, his actions will continue. But the point is, it will be just like the continuation of the momentum, like the arrow in his flight path. All the samskaras and vrittis and impressions will be there in his mind, but they will not affect him, they will not have any impact on him. That state is called Sabhija Samadhi. So something is there as if it's like a seed, but the seed is completely burned. It will not sprout. Ta eva Sabhija Samadhi. All these constitutes Sabhija Samadhis. According to Vyasa, the four samadhis described in the previous sutra, Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, they all constitute Sabhija Samadhis. So this is an important point, remember. Of course, Vyasa is the one who actually wrote commentaries on this. That means, of course, there are different views according to different authors. Vyasa is one view, Bhoja is another view. Bhoja was a great king who wrote this commentary, Rajya Martanda, is famous commentary, and also Bhoja Vritti, a smaller book. So Bhoja says this particular bija actually means a kind of a point of support for the person to do things. So Sabhija means Saha Bijena Alambanena Vartate Iti Sabhija, that Sampraඥāta Samadhi. So I mean, in all these forms of concentrations, samapathis, the mind has some external support, but then it will not be affected by the samskaras, smritis and vrittis of the past. So This is the important thing. And then in the 47th sutra, Nirvichara Vaisharidye Adhyatma Prasadaha. This is an important sutra which refers to the ultimate purpose or goal or the benefit of these practices. It says, on the attainment of this clarity that we experience in Nirvichara Samapathi, that means Nirvichare Vaisharidye Adhyatma Prasadaha. What happens is your mind attains a kind of clarity. That clarity is so sublime that the inner atman will shine forth. That Nirvichare Vaisharidya Adhyatma Prasadaha. So when you reach this Nirvitarka Samabhati, what happens is total clarity of mind. So again, the used is here, mind is used here. But that mind of a yogi who has reached this state is not a mind of the ordinary person. The ordinary person's mind is full of vrittis, vasanas, samskaras, waverings, fluctuations, confusions and conflicts, because his mind connects with everything that happens around him. Mind flows towards different objects through eyes. You see something, and that visual object produces big volcanic force in your mind, mental system, and mind is disturbed. You hear something, the hearing also becomes a source of trouble to the mind. So also you smell something, you touch something, and also you taste something. All these can have their impact on the mind. So mind is never clear, not clean. So it is always in a state of fluctuation, conflicts, this or that. Sankalpa vikalpatmika antakarana vritti is the definition of mind. Mind is nothing but a vritti functioning as one thought and counter thought, like a pendulum moving from one end to the other end. When a person reaches this state of Nirvitarka Samadhi that we described till now, till 46th Sutra, Patanjali says, then you attain a kind of clarity, inner purity. And that is the highest result, and then Atman manifests itself. In actual life, this Adhyatma Prasada can be connected, can be explained. We can relate in our own life. I explained this earlier. Let us say, when we do something really effective, really sublime, with a sense of pure purpose, let us say, without any selfish purpose, without any selfishness, without any selfish motive. That action, it could be a word that we speak, that is also an action. A thought that we think, that is also a kind of action at the mental level. All these, any of these actions, when it's totally pure from any, free from any kind of selfish motive, it will have a kind of inner, it will produce a kind of tranquility and peace, a sublime, purifying effect, result in the mental system. This could be experienced by anyone. Any noble deed, any noble thought, any noble word for any normal person will have a positive, a kind of tranquilizing effect or healing effect on the mental system. That is actually the beginning of this journey at the level of yoga practice. That is actually an example of Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is the first sutra, Tapaswadhyaya Isapranidhana, Kriya Yoga. Vajaspati and other commentators, they include Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, all these in the category of Kriya Yoga. So any noble act, any noble thought, any noble word will have a positive, purifying effect on the mind. That is actually a small, tiny fraction of this Adhyatma Prasada mentioned in this 47th Sutra. Of course, real Adhyatma Prasada comes much later. But to give an idea of what it means in our life, we can see it this in our own experience. Whenever we do something with a noble purpose, or let's say without any selfish purpose. It could be with a noble purpose, or it could be without any selfish purpose. That action will produce a kind of inner tranquility and peace. That is the kindergarten of yoga practice. That's the beginning of our journey, our quest for this Adhyatma Prasada mentioned in the 47th Sutra. Of course, the complete tranquility and peace comes only when this Vaisharadhya, Nirvichare Vaisharadhya, on the attainment of clarity in this Nirvichara state, or when the clarity of mind is attained in the Nirvichara state, what happens? Then the atman manifests. So, any kind of this inner feeling of fulfillment, peace and tranquility is a manifestation of that shining of the atman within. That the beginning of journey in our search for this Adhyatma Prasada. So after this we will conclude today. You can have interaction. You are most welcome. This subject needs more discussion. I shall take up the commentaries in the next class, because this should be done gradually. Okay? You are most welcome to ask questions.
Maharaj, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, the Nirvitarka samapathi.
Yeah.
There, you mentioned that, I mean, it is defined as I understand, that if you concentrate on an object, then you get the inner meaning, not the meaning which is described in everyday language. Yeah. Now, the question is that if you concentrate on a banana or a mango, now these two are different things. Now, so the thing is, the inner meaning of a banana and the inner meaning of a mango to a yogi, will that be different, or is that the same?
Yeah, okay. The question, I have to clarify one point, then you can understand the implication. See, when a person reaches a state of cognition, let us say in simple language, when he is able to cognize something, then of this state, Nirvitarka samapathi, then he is able to cognize things without associating these objects with the Sabda, artha and jnana, mixing up. Pure jnanam alone remains there. This is an important thing. So, a yogi, how the yogi perceives this is not in terms of differences with regard to mango, banana, etc. His understanding of the object will be only as a mystical idea. He will not focus on the shape of the fruit or anything like that. Actually, the cognition mentioned in this sutra cannot be understood if you compare it with normal human cognitions like bananas, mangoes, whatever it is. No. Here, the cognitive faculties are transcended to the level of cognition of external objects, empirical objects. Is it beyond empirical? At that stage, he will not even bring his mind to the level of cognizing these objects as we understand, as normally we understand. That's an important thing to remember. Yeah.
Will he have control over that object?
He will have complete control. Yeah, complete. Actually, he will not use it. As a result of a yogi in search towards this Nirvitarka samapathi, he will have already acquired a lot of skills, what we call vibhuti. We already discussed in the vibhuti pada, we discussed. But he will not be worried about it, he will not be using it. Some yogis use it, some don't use it. That's why sometimes you find when Sri Ramakrishna, for example, met the Trailinga Swami in Benares. Trailinga Swami is supposed to have lived for more than 300 years. And of course there are references in the travelogues came to Benares in 18th century, who met him, and Sri Ramakrishna visited him, maybe I think in 1870s, I think so, sometime around that, 1870s most probably. I can't remember the exact year. So this yogi, he was a great yogi, he lived for hundreds of years, it is recorded. Now, when he was coming towards him, he already knew. Actually, there were some devotees around him. And after some time, he suddenly stood, he sat up. Then he asked them, you move away. He was actually anticipating the arrival of a great spiritual person. And he knew that somebody was approaching his tiny hut under the earth, which was living there, this Trilinga Swami. And Sri Ramakrishna came there. Now, what was the cognition he used there? What was the cognition used? Or another example I can give. See, Shankaracharya, you can imagine, these books are right in front of us. All the 10 Upanishad commentaries, Gitas, then 65, incomparable Sanskrit poetical works, Brahma Sutra, all these are in front of us. And we know this same Shankaracharya travelled all across India. If we go to extreme Tripura, beyond Bangladesh, their history also records Shankaracharya's visit to Tripureshwari Mandir. Of course, the monastery he founded is there in the extreme west, in Dwaraka, and extreme south. There are many monasteries, places associated with Shankaracharya. Many temples actually which built, Kanji temple, all many of these temples he modified the rituals there. And extreme north Indo-China border, near Badrinath. Now we all know, a historical person, there is nothing mystical, there is nothing mythical about it. Now, how do you imagine a man in 8th century walking all day from extreme south, extreme north and east to west, and writing all the most profound books which today Pandits take 40 years, 50 years to study and then debate and think and understand. Still you can find, if you go to India, old Pandits, fat, pot-bellied Pandits, 40 years, 50 years, spending their whole lifetime studying and debating what's the meaning of this statement in Shankara's commentary, what's the meaning of that statement. There is a big debates and controversies on the meanings of some words that he used. And not just philosophical classics. The most wonderful, spiritually elevating, devotional poetry came from the same person. And he was the one, actually, the pujas, the rituals that we do, his creation. Temples that he built and modified. And then debates all over the country. He debated with the greatest scholars, Buddhists, Mimamsakas, Sankhyas, yogis and so on. And everything over within 32 years. Now what was the kind of mind that he had? And remember, he never had a book with him when he wrote books. The Vedas that he commented upon all in his head only. You'd be surprised. Before Shankara, the Upanishads were not so clearly distinguished as separate, compact, canonical literature. He studied the entire Vedas in their bulk and put in his head, and then he remembered them all, wrote commentaries, and those commentaries actually became the first classification. But the line of demarcation between Brahmanas and Aranyakas and Upanishads and Samhitas, it was he who did it. So what was the kind of head he had? What was the kind of cognition that he was using? Imagine. And everything over in 32 years. And he finished all the books. Whatever books you are reading today, he finished before he left his 12th grade. Or he was younger than many of the 11th grade, 10th grade students today. 9th grade students. Now what was the kind of cognition he was using? What I say, so it is not the numerical totality, the essential totality. If a person reaches that kind of cognition, he doesn't use his ability to understand, analyze. He employs those abilities and faculties not the normal way we do. Even Swami Vivekananda, in one context, I can give an example, Swamiji's life. Somebody asked Swamiji in an informal conversation when he was traveling, maybe in Europe, Swamiji, how did he read books? He read vertically, not horizontally. Actually, when you read a book from left to right, you read the whole sentence, then you try to connect words and meaning. But Swamiji his eyes just moved from top to the left, top to the bottom. And he remembered. So the point is, what was the kind of mind that Shankaracharya had? These original commentaries. Still people are fighting over what he wrote. Ramanujan, Madhva, Vallabha, Nirvitarka, and of course Chaitanya, all of them were trying to follow what he wrote. They either agreed with him or disagreed with him. But they could not cross over him. Now what was the kind of Shankara had? The mind. It's not the mind as we understand it. Again, when we try to understand this, we are trying to analyze things from our point, our perspective, where we stand. It's an important thing to remember. So what I mean to say is, it is, I know when the people in modern times, they may think it's all mythical things. It may appear to be mythical, but even modern times we had people, I don't compare them with Shankaracharya or anybody, but still we had great men who did great things, magnificent things, original things. Even Jesus Christ, only very short lifespan of time. So how did you just imagine the impact of the Sermon on the Mount for 2000 years? It influenced humanity, human civilization. So where do you place them, and how do you try to understand the way their minds worked? So we had this problem, we should remember. We are trying to understand things which are really beyond our present available tools of understanding. This is an important thing. So that's why when a person reaches that level of Nirvitarka samadhi, and remember this yoga was practically all the great spiritual teachers of the world were yogis. Yogis mean they were not systematically practicing one after another. When a person really fully gets established in yamas and niyamas, he already becomes a yogi. Remember, it's just like you enter a bus or you enter a flight, a plane that is moving in one direction. Your destination, you as good as reached there. So one you have to remember, yoga here doesn't necessarily mean Patanjali Yoga Sutra. What Patanjali wrote is an attempt to analyze something that cannot be really analyzed in words, which can only be practiced. That's an important thing. Ahimsa is not a word, ahimsa. Ahimsa is a spiritual, moral, ethical discipline. So, in whatever culture, in whatever tradition, great yogis, great spiritual persons lived, they were all yogis. And naturally, as a practice of the yoga disciplines, their mind acquired certain qualities, certain unique faculties. And that gave them a kind of cognitive power, which is beyond understanding in the normal analysis of our, using our own present tools, available tools today. That's important.
But according to Shankaracharya's own words, did he ever explain in what state his mind, what state his mind was?
He didn't explain, but there is a statement, and more than once a statement, Shankaracharya writes, he never wrote anything that he himself had not experienced. Shankaracharya's Bhashya contains words, sentences. He never really wrote anything that he had not himself experienced. Especially in Advaita, when he deals with Advaita experiences, he says that. So if you analyze today the amount of work they did and the impact of what they did, do you think that it is possible for a normal human mind to do that? Is it possible for a normal human mind to do that? That's what I'm thinking. Normal mind is not only, man, let us say 140 IQ, let's say, 150 IQ, very brilliant, very. Do you think such a person, there are many people in this world today. So it is not even IQ. We cannot even understand or analyze in terms of IQ. That's an important thing. So, maybe in course of time, we may develop certain tools that go beyond the tools that which are available today. See, today we won't be discussing Vedas without Shankara. The Upanishads constitute the essence, the philosophical portion of the Vedas. The Upanishads nobody knew what these Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, all the Mahavakyas, what they really implied in terms of spiritual experience. Nobody knew before Shankara wrote commentaries on this. I am just giving the example of just 4 Mahavakyas, which can be written in 2 lines of a book. Even the Mahavakya, Aham Brahmasmi, the Mahavakya, if you read the commentaries, at least English, if you read the profound interpretations and the spiritual implication, nobody knew what they, before Shankara wrote a commentary. Before Shankaracharya entered the scene, there were commentators who wrote some little commentaries, Mahidhara, and a few, not too many. But they gave a very, very limited, not a fully philosophical, spiritually elevating interpretations of some of the Veda mantras. But the whole thing he classified in his head and wrote commentaries. Even Gita, I give this example, Gita. We won't be discussing Gita today if Shankaracharya had not written a commentary on this. See, follow? I'm giving one example which everyone knows. There are other examples. Yeah. So we are trying to analyze things which are really beyond our power of analysis. So that's the point.
Yeah, we are missing one thing.
Yeah.
How to make a Shankaracharya.
No, of course. We need not worry about it. One is good enough, you know. Okay, enough. Anyway, so the point is, see, of course, this is true. Like a man like Buddha, his work, of course, he lived for 80 years. His work continues to inspire. Man like Jesus Christ, his work continues. Vivekananda, he lived only 39 years, and we are discussing these great spiritual ideas because of Vivekananda. Even Yoga Sutras that we are discussing right now. Yoga Sutras got the most sensible interpretation from Vivekananda in English language. Swamiji's translation is based on the traditional commentaries that are available then. If you want to get an example of the uniqueness of Vivekananda's interpretation, you read the Harvard-oriented series literal translations of some of the commentaries, which really, you read it, you won't be able to read for long, but you won't be able to make a meaning out of it. When you read Vivekananda, suddenly you will be able to relate it to your own life. You may not be a scholar, but you'll be able to relate it. So there's a personal, intimate touch. He just brings it and connects with your mind. He brings it right to our times, into our life. So that's the magical touch of great yogis. They were born in different traditions. I have found similar examples in the writings of the Saint Teresa of Avila, the inner castle, or as I mentioned very often, Brother Lawrence and in the writings, the great Russian small mystical work, the Way of a Pilgrim, small tiny book, almost a peasant who was hardly just literate, that's all. He wrote in his own language, he wrote something. It's tremendous impact. Much greater impact than many learned theologians who would have written Latin and Greek. But this humble peasant's writings still inspire people. So you can find many examples. I mean, the language they speak and the level of cognition they had. So if you say if it is miracle or occult, immediately you will feel terrified. So better don't use that term. You can say, as you evolve in spiritual life, you develop a different mind. A mind of different quality. And that's the result of transcending mind as we understand in our terms. the higher mind. That's what he means here. Very difficult to connect with this. So that's why I'm giving some examples. Bobby, you have anything to say?
Maharaj, Yogi, I do, but Yogi has his hand up.
Please, Yogi, please carry.
Pranam, Maharaj.
Namaskar.
The samapathis or samadhis, I understand both are similar words or equivalent. Savichara, Nirvichara, Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Sasmita, Sananda, Nirananda, all these 8 mentioned samadhis. Are they exclusive to each other or do they overlap? For example, in Savitarka samadhi, is there Ananda or something like that?
Yeah, Ananda is there in varying degrees. As we advance, we move from one level of Ananda to another level of Ananda. Ananda means bliss. In fact, the bliss is present in all the stages of spiritual evolution, yoga. So there is a difference in degrees, not difference in kind. I shall discuss maybe elaborately in the next class. Okay. So the simple answer is there is a difference in degrees, but there is no difference in kind. So even when you just start practicing ahimsa, immediately you have a little bit of this ananda. But again, the ananda used, sananda, nirananda used in the technical language, then you just got a structured definition and meaning in the context of the particular sutra. But take it out of that particular context, then you find every stage presents a degree of ananda, some degree of ananda, inner bliss. That begins right the moment you enter into yoga, either through Kriya yoga, that's one path, or the practice of ahimsa, the first of the yamas, which means the first item in the entire Ashtanga yoga. The moment you do that, you get this ananda bliss. We will discuss this in the coming sutra class. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands up, and I didn't see any on YouTube.
So okay. Thank you.
There is one. Okay. Go ahead, Jag.
Thank you.
Thank you. Swamiji, I'm just trying to understand the difference between the terms vichara and vitarka. In my mind, vichara stands for inquiry, and vitarka is deliberation. Am I correct in that?
Of course, in the yoga system, in the technical yoga system, there is a difference. I know that some of these need little more elaborate discussions. I shall discuss this more elaborately, along with the Sananda Nirananda aspect of the coming sutras. Okay? I will discuss this.
Thank you.
They need some elaborate discussions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Jag, I didn't see the hand on the white background. So.
Oh, that's totally fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maharaj, I have a question on, you talked about in the 43rd sutra, you talked about the shunya, I forgot the word you used, samaya shunya, the going beyond the mind.
Surupa shunya.
And then you mentioned two other things about how important yamas and niyamas are. To reach, it's a state you reach naturally as a result. And then you also talked about Shankaracharya's writing on bhakti. So my question, maybe it will help all of us, is many times we get into just the jnana marga or even the meditation, but the supporting infrastructure, if I can call it that way, the following of the yamas, niyamas, and also Ishvara pranidhana. I think those are very important in this journey. Just reading books or attending lectures or just sitting in a quiet place may not get us there. In fact, it can harm us more in that journey. Can you elaborate that?
No. It's a very relevant and related to the sutra that I discussed today. So I shall come to the subject directly. So the sutra is Smriti Parishuddho Surupa Shunya Iva Arthamatra Nirbhasa Nirvitarka. Okay. Now here, Surupa Shunya here it is a direct reference to human mind. Chittasya surupasya. Chittasya, mind's real nature. Mind as it is, normally. What is that mind? It's very wavering, fluctuating, like a pendulum from one end to another end. Continuous stream consciousness, William James called it, maybe. And this continuous thought currents, frequently disconnected. And when this disconnection becomes more manifest, you feel conflict all the more. Now, the point is, when by the practice of the yoga, you get freedom from these conflicts, then you are actually getting freedom from the normal state of human mind, wavering. Then mind actually loses its real swarupa. Swarupa means, its own natural state. So, in other words, mind ceases to be mind. Mind goes beyond itself. Mind transcending itself. This is the essential meaning. And then I mentioned the importance of understanding the true meaning of this Smriti Parishuddhi. We should never try to empty our mind of all memories or impressions. It doesn't happen, and it can do even great harm to human mind. So the first step is to store up a lot of good memories, good impressions, that become, as you mentioned in your own language, kind of structural support. And then you mentioned, that's a very important thing, which I often mention in my classes, It is not a journey at the level of ideas or concepts. Ideas and concepts are important. Even a casual listening to some good talks on spiritual subjects like Yoga Sutra or Gita, wonderful. We should never neglect the importance of even casual listening. It is much better than casually listening to something negative, something undesirable. So even casually, even if you listen to some good noble things, it is not totally devoid of any beneficial result. It has a beneficial result, no doubt. But again, as I mentioned, it is not a journey at the level of ideas. Because you read something Advaita, so let me transcend the mind, one should never try to do that. There are two problems. First of we may have the wrong idea that Advaita means just, I will rather be an Advaitin than something else. So I can choose that. The point is, it's a gradual ascent to Advaita. Gradual ascent means you don't lose the feet, your feet is still strongly fixed on Mother Earth, on Earth. You have a strong foundation, support. You don't lose it. If a person, and this happens to many people, such people can end up being a total atheist, kind of anarchy, psychological anarchy, a total confusion, not being able to believe in anything. And that can lead to frustration and terrible problems, kind of intellectual anarchy. I cannot give a better example than Dostoevsky. He was a member of a very, very, very dangerous, I would say psychologically very damaging kind of group in mid-19th century Russia. And there are many of that group, actually Belansky, Pushkin, all of them belong to the category. Tolstoy was a great philosopher. He had something very lot of positive aspect in it. But these people were terrible people, and their life was total chaos. So, because they thought by believing in an idea, they are practicing that idea. When you believe in an idea, you are not necessarily practicing that idea. We often delude ourselves into thinking that when I take an interest in Advaita, I become an Advaitin, so I need not go to temple. Absolutely dangerous. Totally dangerous. Even simple example is, the greatest of Advaita philosophers, even dialecticians like Padmapada, Khandana Khandagadiya's author, Sriharsha, Chitsugacharya, who is the author of Chitsugi, Tattupratipika, all these great post Shankarite Advaita dialecticians were doing puja every day, praying to their deities every day, and chanting devotional hymns every day. Then they were writing books which taught you that you should not limit your religion to temples. You should go beyond temples. And they were going to temples every day. They wrote that. They wrote about Brahman, Maya, is beyond temples and rituals, everything. Why? Because you have a mind. You have the physical body and the mind. They need something. Shankaracharya understood that. The Shankaracharya who wrote the most, you may call it, in terms of dialectical language, the most outrageously challenging dialectical works. Even Khandana Khandaka, the post Shankarite time, Sriharsha and others, every day they were praying their temples, every day they were chanting names, Ishar Panidhanadva Pumsam Advaita Vasana. This term was used by Sriharsha himself. Without the grace of God, no one can develop an interest in Advaita. These are the lines written by the most cutthroat dialecticians of post-Shankarite times. So what it means is, this is very dangerous to mistake that when you believe in something, you have become that. I think that's a problem with Kant. There's a problem with Kant, critique of pure reason. See, the problem with Kant and Eckhart is, Eckhart also spoke of these high Advaitic ideas. Eckhart is the Shankara of Christianity. But he was a strong believer in God. He believed in grace. Shankaracharya also believed in grace. Gadistum tameka bhavani. Bhavani Ashtagam. Oh Divine Mother, you are the only destination. You are the only support. And the writer of all these great dialectical works, Shankaracharya, he shouts and moves all over the world, everywhere. Oh Divine Mother, you are the only support. That was what Eckhart also did. Look at Kant. He critical practice, pure reason, thing in itself. And I don't think the man was completely normal. So, that's why it is very important. That's why the greatness of Eckhart on the one hand, he was a theologian, but he was a philosopher. And Kant, the difference is, Eckhart had his feet firmly placed on earth. Kant was floating in the skies, moving with clouds. So nobody was benefited by what he wrote. He was a great intellectual, great dialectician. He demolished utilitarianism, British empiricism and so on. So what I mean to say, when you travel in the world of spiritual ideas, highly intellectual, dialectical ideas, you should have your feet firmly placed on earth. How do we do that? Never give up your own spiritual practices. So long as a human being has a body and a mind, he should understand that. That's why Advaita is not a denial of Saguna, Sakara, I mean the personal. Advaita is not a denial of the personal. Advaita is going beyond the personal. So even in Sri Ramakrishna, Mother, Divine Mother herself opened the door to Sri Ramakrishna to go to the higher Advaita experience. Mother herself opened the door to Sri Ramakrishna to go beyond herself. So, of course, if you read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you will understand. So the point is, very often there is a great danger in deluding ourselves into thinking that spirituality is a journey on the plane of ideas and concepts. No, people make that mistake. Yeah, okay, thank you. The question. So we will conclude now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.